And Dan, we're officially live on the Books4Guys podcast today. And man, I'm excited to talk with you because your book is, I read a lot of business books, I read a lot of personal development books, but I've never seen one quite like yours. And so I'm pretty excited to talk about it. But how are you this week, Dan?
Fantastic. We had our book launch on Tuesday. That was the publication date. So we're really excited. And yeah, I'm a lifelong Beatle fan, lifelong reader of leadership and management books. And, for the last 5 years, this has been running through my head and it just made more sense as I dove into it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's so I wanted to I've got your company here, which is Absher. It's a commercial construction company where you guys do a lot of projects, and it looks like it's been a family business for what, 60, 70 years now?
My grandfather started the company in 1940, and almost 4 years ago now, we became an employee-owned company. So now the employees own it, it's fantastic. They're
Yeah.
doing great.
Yeah. And are you still, I mean, I know you've been a big part of it for many years. Are you still in the day-to-day operations of leading that organization or?
Not day to day. I'm chair of the board, but I've handed it over to Jeff Richards, who's our president, and he's taking it places I wasn't taking it, so he's doing great.
Yeah. Well, it's been around a long time, so you guys have done a lot of good things and a lot of right things, and I'm sure that'll continue. But no, well, Dan, let's talk about your book because I've got it pulled up here. The Fab Four Pillars of Impact: Building Dynamic Teams the Beatles Way. Just so you said lifelong Beatles fan, but go through the story of just how you came about this idea and just the journey you've been on to spin this and put this into a book that people can read and build teams and organizations with.
Yeah, well, I throughout my career I applied Beatles lessons. I taught a class called Team Building with the Beatles in our company, so I would use Beatles songs, Beatles history to teach them how to team build. Did an exercise, which Beatle are you? And I would describe the various personalities and roles they'd play and which one are you? And it just resonated with people. And the, at one point, I heard Steve Jobs on 60 Minutes say that the Beatles were his model for business. I resonated with me. I said, yeah, that's what I've been saying. And then Malcolm Gladwell used the Beatles as one of his examples for the 10,000 hours to reach proficiency in his Outliers book. And I found more and more pieces of that. But I was busy running a company, raising a family, 6 children. It's hard to have time. But once I stepped away and COVID hit some friends of mine asked me, hey, during COVID, let's do some socially distanced Beatles history. Will you teach us the Beatles history? Because they knew I knew a lot about the Beatles. And we did that. And they were all business people and they enjoyed it. And then I started doing presentations to business groups. And the more I do it, the more it resonated. And a little over a year ago, I said, I'm going to take all that research and put it into a book.
Yeah.
That's how it came about.
Yeah. You going back to the very first part of this conversation, you're talking about you were teaching lessons through the Beatles at work. And obviously you got a lot of supporting, I guess, kind of supporting material, seeing Steve Jobs and Malcolm Gladwell kind of validate your thoughts. But did did the idea just come to you? Like, how did you decide, like, hey, I'm going to incorporate the Beatles and I'm going to just use it at work to help train groups or more? Like, where did the idea first spark from?
About February 9th, 1964. I was 5 years old, and I saw them, and they were excellent. And I've just always been a fan of excellence and high achievement. And yeah, honestly, I was fourth of 6 children. So my older siblings fell in love with the Beatles too, and it's just always been a part of my life. So there was never one day where the idea hit me. It's always been incorporated in my life. And I did some sports, I did music, so it never wasn't a part of my story.
Interesting. Interesting. And then as you got into the professional and leadership space, you just kind of put it all together and thought, hey, I'm going to incorporate what I love, what I can teach from it, and put that out there. And now you have a book that's been released
Yeah.
this week, which is super cool.
And the other thing, I love music, and I've found that using music when you're teaching, it helps people remember the lessons. And, you know, most people really appreciate music. In fact, more business leaders than I ever thought, they really identify with music, and it's kind of their sideline, and they don't blend them much. I thought, we leaders in the business world need to be using music because it's the universal language.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sitting here thinking, Dan, I mean, I've been in the corporate world now for, I don't know, I guess going on 12 years. And I've sat through many of trainings and just different sessions that you go through,
Right.
at corporate level things. But having this type of approach where you're incorporating the Beatles, or, if someone just took a different approach like this, I could certainly see where as an employee, I would be a lot more engaged. I would probably listen a lot more. I would actually take notes. I would understand how this applies, using examples that are a little bit different than your traditional just method here. And I'm curious to know just over the years, how you've been able to perfect it. I mean, obviously you've put it into a book now, but from like your very first time of trying to incorporate the Beatles into what you were trying to put out there to your employees, and then today where you're doing it a lot more efficiently and higher scale. What did that look like? How successful, I guess, was your very first attempt to incorporate the Beatles into this teaching?
People have always enjoyed it. I've definitely fine-tuned it. As an example, it started with the 7 keys to the Beatles' success, and that just didn't flow real well, and I thought, "We gotta have 4. It's gotta be the Fab 4." And so I massaged it a little bit, and for instance, I had one for people and then putting them in the right seats. Those were 2 different pillars. I just combined those into 1 pillar and to make 5 or 4 clear pillars. And so I massaged it over time. I learned lessons. When I just teach Beatle classes that aren't for business, I do a lot more about the music and some of the stories that aren't so related to business. And so doing that, I could learn what would relate to a community group versus what would relate to business group. You just fine tune it over time. And boy, I'll tell you, there's nothing like writing a book to force you to fine tune your thoughts into
Yeah.
something that's cohesive.
Yeah, and that's what I was really curious about, is just how that process went. Because 'cause I'm sure, yeah, you've been doing it for a long time now, just how different it looks today than it did,
Yeah.
your first year or 2 going through, trying to incorporate this. You have something and it's working, it's effective, but just the transition over the years on how to fine tune it. I'm always curious what the first attempt looked like, and then, like, where it's at now, what the middle part of that look like.
Yeah. It, um, you know, I had another author tell me that, you never really finish the book, they just publish it. So it's still in my mind that,
Yeah,
oh, I
yeah, yeah.
could tweak it this way and that way.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy with how it ended up, but there are still things, going through my mind. Like
Yeah.
I added a playlist at the end of each chapter of songs that apply to the chapter. Once in a while, I'll hear a song going, oh, that might have been a better song in that chapter.
Yeah.
When I do presentations, the songs may not be quite the same as they're in the book. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, and by no means is it a finished method or product. You'll continue to fine tune it, but
Yeah.
you'll have more and more to continue to talk about and offer, and this is something that is just part of that journey. That's really cool to be able to accomplish. I do want you to talk about the 4 pillars, because that's obviously the title and the main meat of your curriculum through this. And I don't want you to give too much away, because I want people to read the book and really dive in deep. But talk about the 4 pillars, what each one of them are, and what they each represent.
Yeah. The first pillar is right people, right seats. And that's a quick story on that pillar. I'll do one quick story on each pillar. 1957, when John and Paul met, Paul saw John playing at the St. Peter's Church Festival. John was the head of his Quarrymen rock band. They met afterwards in the church hall, and Paul borrowed John's guitar. John being right handed, Paul had to flip it upside down. So he's doing chords in reverse. to make it sound right and played a couple songs. Then he ran over to the piano, played a couple Little Richard songs, imitating Little Richard's voice. At the time, Paul's 15. And I mean, that incredible talent. And John had to make a decision. And he didn't invite Paul in right away, not because he wasn't good, but because he was too good.
So
And
good.
John had his own little come to Jesus meeting with himself. Do I want someone who might be better than me, more talented musician? And in a few weeks, he said, oh, of course, we want to be the best we can be. And that's what every leader needs to know. You know, you got to attract the right people. You got to give them space to do the right things. So that's pillar one. Pillar two is catalytic vision. And this is one of the things that really spurred me into this book too. When I read, now it's a couple decades ago, but I read John's early on, he had a little mantra he would have the guys say, you know, where are we going, boys? We're going to the top. And where's the top? We're going to the toppermost or the poppermost. So from the very beginning, John said, we set out to be bigger than Elvis. And that just blew me away. I mean, you think, oh, these are kids from Liverpool. No, there was never any famous musicians from Liverpool. How could they have that dream? But they did, and they kept working on it. So that's vision. It just inspired them. In Jim Collins' books, he writes about people are primary to the vision. In my book, I say I think that's the chicken or the egg, because the vision attracts the people attract you need the people to have the vision. You need the vision to attract the right people. Like those first two pillars are really 1A and 1B. And then there's esprit de corps is the third pillar. And this is all about setting your ego aside. My example there, when they came to America, we're on the Ed Sullivan Show. You know, John Lennon has been working his whole life for this moment in America, and he basically hands the limelight over to Paul. Paul, they sing 5 songs. Paul's lead on 3. John and Paul sing co-lead on 2. And first of all, really smart, because Paul had that TV charisma that worked really well.
It does.
But to step aside, a leader knowing when it's time to step aside for your people, that's important. That builds that esprit de corps. And the fourth pillar I call the magical mystery. And there's just, with the Beatles and really all successful organizations, there's something that's just magic. You can't put your fingers on. Part of it's synergy. You know, the sum is greater than the parts. That's what Steve Jobs said about them. And I'm from Seattle here, and it's the same thing about the Seattle Seahawks football team. Individually, they don't have a lot of all-pro guys, but together they're just so much better than the individuals. That's another example of that. And then just serendipity, just these lucky accidents that happened along the way for the Beatles. And I find that with all great organizations. And in studying it, I've discovered it's not as much that they're lucky, is that they take everything that happens and they say, how can we make this fortunate or make luck out of this? My example they're in the studio. John thought an amplifier was turned off. He put his guitar, who also wasn't turned off, up against it, had this huge feedback, and it hurt everyone's ears. And rather than panic, they go, oh my gosh, we got to use that. And it became the opening to I Feel Fine, #1 record. I mean, people say, well, that was just a lucky accident. Well, they were looking for luck. So that's what I try to teach, that you can set yourself up for finding serendipity.
Yeah. I love all of this, Dan. I'm smiling because everything you're saying is leading me to certain memories that I have. Like,
Yeah.
I remember actually, I was in choir in junior high, and we sang a Beatles concert where we did like 8 or 9 of their songs. And I was like, I remember having a solo and singing that. And that's when I got kind of introduced to the Beatles. I mean, I knew who the Beatles were, but I didn't really know their songs until we learned them. Uh, and obviously Paul's still out there, so you get to watch him a lot. Side note too on Seattle, you'll be happy to know I've got a Seahawk hoodie I'll be wearing on Sunday, so we'll be cheering for the same team
There you go.
there. But no, I love talking about organizations and just a lot of things you said, because I'll give my company a shout out, TechStream, who I work for. As you're talking about the synergy and leadership, I love talking to people about my company. And I tell people all the time how blessed I am to work there because of just the people and the approach that leadership takes on. They're very open, hey, here's an issue, but they do it in a way where they welcome ideas, like, "How do we pivot here? How do we make this better?" And everyone comes together, and there is that magicalness to it
Yeah.
that I haven't seen anywhere else I've been, and there's just something about the group and the energy and everything about it. So when you're talking about that, I'm sitting there going like, I feel lucky to be a part of an organization that has that feeling and has the right people more so than not. And I know a lot of people they seek that when they're joining organizations. They want to be somewhere long term. It feels like there's a very small percentage out there that has it, but when you find it, you're like, this is the model, you know? So it's really cool to for you to break that down into those pillars. And it's even more cool for me to be able to say, check, check, check. I'm so lucky to work somewhere. This is really cool. Dan would like seeing our company, I think. But what's your, when you go and talk about these pillars at different organizations, um, I don't know, when you're meeting with them and you're going through this process with them, what's a takeaway from you? Where do you see companies most struggle, or what's a pillar that you see the most difficulty? When organizations are standing, what's a pillar that seems to be the weakest link?
I think it's the vision. A lot of companies start with a vision. In fact, that's what the Beatles did. They had a really strong vision. What organizations don't understand and teams don't understand, you got to reset that vision or your goals or something frequently because things change or you lose the thread of that vision. And, I've also done some coaching and, at the beginning of each season, you need to, what's our vision for this team? What's our goal? And you need, it can't be top down, you got to get buy-in. And so I think that's not only the weakest, it's also the one you can most intentionally improve. It's an exercise. You got to be willing to do it, but you just go through and you allow input and you decide where you want to go. And it's where a lot of teams fall down. But you got to have that before you can communicate about it. So most people would say communication's where we fall down. Yeah, that's true. But if you don't have people
So
don't know where they're going,
yeah,
it doesn't do any good to communicate about going nowhere. So
yeah. I like how you said too, like the vision and the people go hand in hand. You got to have the vision to attract the people. You got to have the right people to create the vision and get the vision moving in a certain direction. But I couldn't agree more. And again, I think back of, the company I work with, there's quarterly conversations, yearly conversations, and there's been actually a lot of pivots that I've heard say, "Hey, we're going to do this and we're changing this." But it's in a way that everybody is like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. There's no, and again, maybe I'm lucky. I feel like I'm a part of a group that's just like, yeah, let's go. Let's figure it out. And not much, division or pushback on it. But I could see where you've got to deliver that vision in a certain way to get, and I'm sure it's even more difficult at larger organizations where there's a lot of different groups and a lot of different people that want to have a say and have a part in it. But I could see where that's, and again, this is just real fast. I love the business side of stuff, even just Books for Guys. I started this 3 years ago, and there's been different things I've added and different processes I've done. I've asked other people for help and I've listened, and it's just an exciting thing to be open to. But I just find it fascinating. And again, like you breaking it down the way you do, I'm sitting here in my head thinking about it, and you've got my brain and my wheels turning. That's a good thing. I'm
yeah, that's
really
the
into
idea.
this.
Yep. Yep. That's the idea.
Yeah. So, besides the Beatles, Dan, just a random question, who else have been some of your favorite you're a big music guy, who have been some of your favorite musicians just in your lifetime?
Yeah, boy, I have wide-ranging musical taste, but I often come back to Elton John, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, love Simon and Garfunkel because I'm an
Yeah.
old guy.
Let me ask you this question, because obviously you based all of your work around the Beatles. Are there other groups that you or individuals that you've incorporated with the Beatles into this curriculum and this thought process?
Yeah, again, because I'm an old guy, one of my biggest influences in my life was John Wooden, the old UCLA basketball
Yeah,
coach.
yeah. I've read his
But his
books, a couple of them.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
read his They Call Me Coach book when I was in high school, and that just had a profound impact on me. So, you know, eh, he values that he wrote out and convinced me that's a good thing to do, and so I did that really early. So that's helped drive me. Um, my dad had a big influence on me. Steve Largent, I've always admired him, back to the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah.
But I'd say John Wooden and the Beatles have been are most interwoven in my leadership philosophy.
Yeah. Well, those are good, especially John Wooden. That's a good one to to follow and use. I read 2 of his books,
Yeah.
recently, and they're some of the most recommended books out there for people, and, I know why, and he was, uh, an example of excellence, in a lot of different ways, and so, no, he's an easy one to follow. Dan, with your book, The Fab Four, so it's not just for leaders. It's not just for people leading and building organizations. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who can take something from it. But what's your hope when someone picks up and reads your book? If there's one thing you hope they take away from it, what do you hope that lesson is, or that one bit of information you hope they pick up on?
I hope that they pick up on that the Beatles' dominant message throughout their career was about love and peace. And I incorporate that into the book and into my leadership philosophy. But I talk about, that's inherent in all of those pillars, that they approach things from a place of love and peace. And, you don't have to be a bully to make it. You don't have to be a jerk to be successful in business. There are successful businesses that, in my mind, do it the right way. Perhaps they sacrifice occasionally on the bottom line, but I think in the long run, you build a more stable business that way. The book also applies to families, to sports teams, to groups, even individual success. The book should be inspiring to achieve individual success. I do draw a lot, not in the book, but I often think about, so what's the difference between the Beatles and, say, Taylor Swift or Michael Jackson, who are probably the 2 other biggest, going before the Beatles, Elvis or Frank Sinatra. The difference is the Beatles did it as a team, and no other group's really done. I mean, you could argue that Taylor Swift is doing what the Beatles did, but she's an individual, and that's different than trying to manage a team toward that success. Makes it more applicable to business. Not to take anything away from Taylor Swift. It's
Yeah,
remarkable what she's done, but as a model for business, the
yeah,
Beatles are just a great model.
yeah. It's very interesting that no one's been able to replicate that at that level since them. There's been big bands and such, big groups, but not like them. And you're writing a book using them as an example 60 years, later, which is that says enough. No, it's incredible. This is awesome, Dan. I love this because I'm learning a lot too. Again, I didn't grow up with the Beatles. I've kind of seen them from afar. I've learned things, and I've never seen it. I've never seen them been applied to business in this way. So it's really fascinating to me and something new for me to learn and take something from. But one more question for you, Dan. I like to ask a lot of people this. Your book's certainly one that I think the title and the story is gonna grab a lot of attention and people are gonna be very interested in reading it. But if besides your book, what's a book or 2 that has had a big impact on you personally or professionally? And, if someone like me were to come and say, "Hey, Dan, I need a good book recommendation," what's one that you like to recommend to others?
Well, probably the biggest leadership business type book that influenced me was Good to Great by Jim Collins.
It'd be great, yeah.
I'll throw a fiction book out there that had a big impact on me is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. It's about building cathedrals. Of course, it helped me that it was about design and building a cathedral,
Yeah,
but
some
just the,
synergy
the
there.
comprehensive interplay of how they did it back then, and there's intriguing leadership success stories in that. So there's a fiction and a nonfiction that really influenced me.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'll have to add that. I've read Good Great. I haven't read the other one. I'll have to add that to my list.
Yeah.
It did make me think of one more question, Dan, because you were talking about, I can tell you like sports, music, and you're talking about how this book can apply to so many different groups out there. What's a dream group of yours or a dream company of yours that you would love to have an opportunity to speak with or to work with? And I'm thinking of this in just so you have some contents like Books for Guys. I would love one day to be able to work with like high level NFL groups, and have athletes that are a part of this and encouraging in a certain way. And you obviously you have a way that you can have an impact. What type of company or groups would you be like, man, I would love to go speak there. I'd love to work with them.
I love this question, and I've never thought of it, and I should be thinking about it. It reminds me of my catalytic vision. If I don't have a vision that's really big, I'll never get there. I guess a sports team like the Seahawks
Yeah.
is probably there.
I was about to say you have to say Seattle. Like Dan's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
work with the Seahawks.
I guess that would be the ultimate that, they're I really enjoy this year's team. Having even back when they won the Super Bowl 11 years ago, that team had some character. Of course, I celebrated, but, it was hard to embrace the whole team. They had some crazy
Yeah.
characters on that
Yeah.
team, but this year's team is a lot more likable.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to chat with the Seahawks and teach them how to build a team.
Yeah.
Um, other thing I wanted to mention, I on my website, fab4academy.com, every day I release a, post, and every day I take a different Beatles song, and I do a little, thought for the day. I give the little backstory on the song. Today, for instance, was the song "And I Love Her," based on a monthly theme. Since it's February, the month of Valentine's Day, it's all about romantic love. And so it's all the Beatle love songs this month, or some solo, because the Beatles didn't have 356 or 65 songs. So I had to fill in with some solo songs, which have been, that's been fun. And then I give a little words of wisdom, like in "And I Love Her" today. The message behind it was, even though Paul wrote it and it's a beautiful song, what made it was the teamwork. Ringo had this beautiful Latin beat behind it. George's acoustic solo guitar in that is just beautiful. And that the team made that great. And it led to my thought is, today, your intention. Today, I will acknowledge one person whose quiet contribution makes my work possible. So, as great as Paul was on that song, and I think that's a great song, without George's and Ringo's contribution, it wouldn't be quite the same.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and we'll definitely include the link to your page in the notes and on the episode in the post so people can go follow and get your daily thoughts on that because that's really cool too. That'd be something really great to look at each day. So I'll make sure that's included. Dan, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And I truly do hope one day you are speaking with the Seahawks, and I'm like, Dan is doing it. We put it into existence and we spoke it out there, and it happened. And so can't wait to see the impact. I mean, this book's only been out a couple days, and so I can't wait to see everything you get to do and accomplish with it,
Yeah, thank
the
you.
impact it has on others. So we'll be watching closely, and we're always here to support you. And again, can't wait to see the impact that it has on everyone.
It's doing pretty well already on Amazon, so I'm excited about that. And as you spoke, I realized I messed up. The group I want to speak to is the Seattle Supersonics.
But yeah, when they make it,
As
when they
soon as they get
return,
back here. Yeah, that's who I need to talk to. So let's dream that into existence.
yeah, NBA franchise back to Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we're gonna have a separate conversation on all these sports because I'm sitting. I've got a Russell Wilson jersey. I've been to Seattle for a game about 10 years ago, but I'm also an Oklahoma City Thunder fan. Thank you
Oh,
for letting us, take that organization.
that's a
But
bad memory.
yeah, but no, we'll put good memories out there to end this. Seattle, everyone knows Seattle needs an NBA franchise again, and they need to be called the Supersonics. Just go ahead and put it back out there. But no, well, Dan, thanks again for doing this. We've got your book on the Books4Guys website. We'll get the link put out there for everyone to follow the daily thoughts with each song. And so, no, thanks again, Dan. I
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Chris. That's been enjoyable. Appreciate it. Good luck.